swear to God, there are moments when your whole life collapses into a single breath. And this morning, on the shoulder of a highway outside Oregon, between the smell of warm asphalt and the sour wind from a nearby dump, I heard that breath fractured uneven rasping, like a tiny lung being squeezed shut. What kind of heartless filth throws a Doberman puppy barely 2 or 3 months old into a death trap like this? You coward, you piece of garbage. If there's a hell, their names are already carved on the door. He lay face down, pressed into dust and weeds, brown ear rims still soft like wet paper. His black and tan coat streaked with mud ribs, showing clear as a skeleton drawn under skin. His neck was trapped inside a broken black plastic pipe dumped from a pile of junk near an old warehouse. Every time he tried to pull back, the pipe edge cut deeper, carving red into flesh. His breathing wasn't breathing anymore, just shallow spasms, quick and cold as needles. And his eyes? God, those round hazel eyes looked at me like the last question a living soul could ask. Do I still have time? I dropped to my knees, skin burning against the pavement. The smell of oil and steel hit my nose. Hey, baby. My voice shook dry and cracked. I'm here. I won't let you die. I'd been a nurse for 27 years. I know when a trachea is collapsing, when a brain is starving for oxygen, and I saw it happening right there in those eyes. I slid 2 fingers between his neck and the pipe's edge, but it was too tight. If I twisted, I'd break his neck. If I didn't, he'd suffocate. I dug through my backpack, only a half-empty water bottle and an old bandana. I wrapped the bandana around the pipe, poured water along his neck to cool and lubricate. The puppy whimpered softly, his body trembling like a live wire. I pressed my hand against his chest, counting heartbeats rapid, scattered, barely coherent. It's okay, breathe. Breathe with me. I whispered, knowing he couldn't understand. But a human voice can sometimes hold a soul in place. I looked around. The highway roared. No one stopped. Just a man carrying a trash bag glancing at me before sneering, "Stray dog." Leave it. I clenched my fist, wanted to scream, but rage wouldn't help him breathe. I forced myself to focus on my hands. I found a strip of nylon tied around the pipe. Maybe someone had used it to choke him. When I cut it loose, a long gasp burst from inside the tube. He was still breathing. I nearly cried. Good boy, you're okay. We've got time. A recycling bin lay tipped over near the fence. I ran to grab it, lined it with my jacket. Come on, baby. I slid my arms under his belly, lifted him. His body was feather-light breath, short and weak, but the heart still beat. I set him in the bin, tucked the jacket around his neck so the pipe wouldn't press down. 15 more minutes, I muttered, dragging the bin along the roadside. The plastic scraped against asphalt, screeching under the hum of distant trucks. Every few feet I stopped, bent down, listened. The breath was still there, thin, but there. I kept going. The wind shoved the stink of wet garbage across my shoulder. My hair clung to sweat. My hands shook, not from exhaustion, from fear. Fear he'd stop breathing before we reached the car. Fear I'd be 1 heartbeat too late. Then 100 yards from the birch trees where I'd parked, the sound stopped. The puppy convulsed body stiffening. No, look at me, breathe. I pressed his chest with my thumb, counted my voice breaking, breathe 1, 2, 3, then came a faint snort, fragile but alive. I bent over, tears spilling onto the black pipe. He was still here. Barely, but here. I drew a deep breath, gripped the bin handle, and pulled harder. No one dies here, not while I'm still breathing. Step by step, I dragged him past the garbage beyond the birch line toward my old car. That little Doberman, frail, lost among human waste, was still fighting, powered only by will and promise. And I, Grace Holloway, 55 years old, understood that this morning I wasn't just saving a dog. I was saving the last living part of myself. I left the hospital nearly a year ago. 27 years in the emergency room, a place where every life was measured by beeps, and final seconds had made me believe that retirement would bring peace. It didn't. The quiet I have now feels less like rest, and more like the silence after a heart stops beating. My little house on the outskirts of Oregon sits right by the highway, quiet enough to hear the wind slice across the tin roof, crickets scratching in the weeds, and the dry tick of the clock. To most people, that would sound like peace. To me, it's a constant reminder that I'm alone. I thought I was used to loss. I've held too many hands growing cold, watched too many eyes close without a word. But when David, my husband, died of a stroke, I learned that no one ever truly gets used to it. After the funeral, I came back here. The house where we once planned to plant lavender around the porch now only grows weeds and keeps a cold pot of tea. To escape the silence, I started driving my old pickup along the highway dumps. Out there, I collected what others had thrown away. A wooden frame, an old table, a cracked pane of glass, took them home, fixed them, painted them, and set them on the porch. There's something about restoring what's been discarded that makes you feel you still matter. Maybe in a way, I was resuscitating my own life. That morning was scorching. The road shimmered with heat, reeking of rubber and steel dust. I carried a water bottle and a small first aid kit, an old habit that never left me. As a truck roared past, the wind kicked up a cloud of grit that sparkled like ash. I pulled over beside an abandoned warehouse, planning to rest a moment, and then I heard it. A faint, raspy gasp hidden between the wind and distant engines. I froze. That sound was burned into my memory, the sound of life fighting for air. Instinct took over before thought. I followed it, stepping over rusted fencing, through weeds and trash. And then I saw it. A tiny Doberman puppy, wedged between scraps of metal, its neck caught in a piece of hard plastic tubing. The skin around it was swollen and raw, every breath ragged and shallow. It trembled, paws curled in tight as if begging anyone to notice. I knelt down. The air smelled of melted plastic blood and sunlight, hot, thick, choking. I've seen hundreds of people suffocate, but I'd never seen a creature fight harder to live. I whispered, "Don't give up, baby. Grace is here." My voice shook, the same words I'd spoken 1,000 times in trauma rooms, but this time they were for a puppy clinging to life. A noise behind me. I turned and saw an old man carrying a trash bag, eyes flat and cold. "Stray dog," he said. "Let it die. Not worth it." Then he walked away. I watched him go, feeling something splinter inside. I'd seen death all my life, but this was the first time I'd watched indifference kill something before my eyes. I placed my hand over the puppy's trembling body. "It's okay, little one. I've got you." And right there, among the heat, the junk, and the stench of metal, I realized I had just found the purpose I'd lost for so long. I dragged the plastic bin along the shoulder like a woman hauling a piece of her own soul. The rim scraping the asphalt in a harsh metallic cry that I almost tuned out because all my attention was on the feeble breath inside each inhale, a thin thread tearing at the edge. My old pickup sat maybe 200 meters beyond the birch line, past a small stand of trees. From where I stood, it felt a mile away, and stopping now would mean letting him die, and I had promised. I never broke a promise to a life that still wanted air. "Come on, baby," I whispered, just a few more minutes. Every time the bin's wheel hit a rut, the little body inside jerked. I could see the pipe tremble and hear a ragged snuffle miss a beat. His neck was swollen, the skin cut raw and bleeding, but he still pulled a fraction more air, as if he knew somebody believed there was still time. I unbuttoned the jacket lining in the bin and wiped sweat from his nose, speaking nonsense he couldn't understand, but needed anyway. "Listen, Grace once brought someone back after 7 minutes without a pulse. They woke up. I saved them. I'll save you. Don't give up." The highway kept roaring trucks indifferent. The world, carrying on like suffering, was just another background noise. I gripped the bin harder and pulled faster, the wind whipping my hair, and the smell of hot tar and wet trash, and a faint metallic tang of blood clinging under it all. Part of me was talking to myself because I was shaking not from fatigue, but from that old familiar dread, the helplessness of a rescuer who isn't sure she'll be in time. Close to the vacant lot, before the birch's gravel crunched underfoot behind me, I turned. A man stood 10 meters away, shirt wrinkled, baseball cap low, holding a bag of trash. His eyes dropped to the bin and soured. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "Saving him," I panted. "He's suffocating. I need to get him to a vet." "A stray, huh?" he said. "I don't know. But he's dying." He scoffed, the smile ugly. "Let him die. Those things cause trouble. Don't let him bother anyone." His words slapped me. In my years as a nurse, I'd heard wails and pleas, watched families call names into empty rooms, but never had I heard someone speak of death with that casual, filthy shrug. "I'm not asking for your help," I said, voice low and cold. "Just step aside." He took half a step back, then called over his shoulder. "You're wasting your time. It's just an animal. People die all the time." I stopped hauling and looked straight at him. "You're right," I said slowly. "People die all the time. And that's exactly why I won't let another living thing die while I can still move." He fell quiet, probably seeing not a middle-aged woman, but an ER nurse who'd just walked out of trauma with adrenaline still in her hands. He turned and walked away. I didn't watch him go. I only heard his steps fade into the wind. When I tightened my grip on the bin, the Doberman stirred as if my voice reached him through the dark. His hazel eyes opened a fraction and fixed on me through the pipe's gap, and the look knotted my throat. He didn't understand my words, but he clung to me anyway. I kept talking as we moved because words hold both of us upright. You know, David and I used to say when we retired we'd stop watching people die. But today I realize I can't do otherwise. Once you hear that fight, you run toward it. At the birch line, I stopped, the leaves trembling like fingertips. I lifted the bin into the passenger seat with care, adjusted the bandana so the pipe wouldn't rub his wound, and breathed a little steadier. 12 minutes left, I told him, smoothing the jacket around his neck. "I won't let anyone call you trash again." I turned the key. The engine answered dull and steady, drowning out the drum of my heart. The truck rolled tires, kicking dust, and from the bin came a faint, clear breath, fragile but unmistakably there. I smiled through my tears. "Listen," I said softly, eyes on the road ahead. "I don't know your name, but if you make it through today, maybe I'll call you Rex. Only fighters survive choking." And so we began our race, with the clock, an old woman, and a tiny life trying to breathe in time together, so neither of us would be left dying on the edge of the world. The clinic door opened like a gate, bright, cold, and silent, in the way places meant to repair souls always are. I carried the plastic bin inside Hand's still dusty jacket streaked with dirt and a heavy kind of fear pressing on my ribs. The air was thick with antiseptic latex and clean soap, a sterile hymn of order, but my heart was screaming beneath it. A receptionist with eyes as sharp as clock hands waved me in. "You came at the right time for an emergency. Room 2. I set the bin on the table, tore the bandana loose. Rex's eyes flickered open, glazed hazel stones swimming in tears. He has neck's caught in a pipe. He can barely breathe. I rasped, my voice steady but raw. The vet appeared, Dr. Amelia small-framed but walking with weight and certainty. That alone calmed me. The ER had taught me how to read steadiness in someone's gait. She bent down, placed her hand on the pup's chest, listened closely like a mechanic to an old engine. 2 priorities, she said: stabilize the airway and use light anesthesia so we can remove the pipe safely. Do you consent?" "Yes," I said instantly. "Do it, now." They moved Rex to the prep table. Under the white lights, everything blurred into the rhythm of an emergency I knew by heart. Cotton rolled out IV ready, the monitor's steady beep, beep, slicing the silence. I stood aside, no longer the nurse, but the family chest, tight with every breath count flashing on the screen. I locked my hands together to stop them from shaking. Tears would only waste oxygen. Amelia explained quickly the PVC pipe had caused swelling and inflammation, the edges cutting into the skin. Twisting it risked tearing muscle, even fracturing the neck or collapsing the trachea. The only safe route was mild sedation and precision cutting millimeter by millimeter. I nodded, heartbeat hammering. "Do it. I trust you." When they injected the sedative, Rex's body slackened, eyes sliding shut. That moment when a creature falls between life and the unknown hit like a punch to the soul. I backed away, as instructed, standing under the sterile glow, watching the scene unfold like a film I couldn't pause. The techs worked with quiet choreography, clamps placed suction-ready, a towel shielding the body, only the neck exposed. Their hands moved with practiced grace. I thought of the times I stitched torn skin of David, how he'd watch me before a trauma shift, and I felt that old ache with a name, the cost of saving life. Then came a stillness, right before the saw hummed, before metal kissed plastic, and I held my breath. The blade whined through the air. Light flashed off the black PVC, a clean sharp crack like a shackle breaking. A fragment dropped to the tray. Rex whimpered, eyes fluttering open, searching for a familiar shape. The doctor cleaned the wound, rinsed it with saline, spread an antibiotic, and wrapped it in fresh gauze. When the pipe was gone, the red ring around his throat still looked brutal, but the rise and fall of his chest deepened. The monitor steadied. The room seemed to breathe again. I reached out, laid my palm on his head, and a long sigh escaped me, not his, but mine, the sound of someone finally releasing the weight of dread. Dr. Amelia looked up, offering a slow smile. "You got here just in time. Any later, and it could have been far worse." Her tone was calm but human, the kind of professional compassion that makes you believe kindness still has a place in the world. I thanked her the way people thank a small, merciful God. They settled Rex into a recovery crate, started fluids, antibiotics, and fitted a soft collar around his neck to keep the wound from rubbing. "We'll observe him for 24 to 48 hours, she said. "If you'd like, you can sign a temporary care form or cover the expenses." I looked into those sleepy brown eyes, and my heart answered before my mouth did. "I'll stay. I'll care for him." My voice cracked, but it held. Before leaving, I bent close and whispered the way nurses whisper to patients who can't yet respond. "Listen, Rex, Grace is here. I'm not leaving you." He twitched, his thin tail flicked once, and he drifted back into sleep. I stood there watching the door, close, my heart heavy, but lighter than it had been in years, because at least today I had beaten the cruelest enemy of all indifference. I brought Rex home in an old plastic crate lined with David's shirt. He slept the whole way, his neck wrapped in white gauze, his breathing heavy but steady. The house, once tomb still, now carried the faint rhythm of another life, a reminder that something here was still fighting to stay. That first evening, I made thin rice porridge with a bit of chicken broth and set the bowl by his crate. He licked a few drops, then turned his head too tired to lift it again. I didn't force him. I just sat beside the crate, hand resting on the plastic, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just rest." The same tone I'd once used for dying patients now belonged to a creature that barely weighed 20 pounds. On the second day, Rex was more alert but terrified of everything. The sound of doors, the dishwasher, even the noise of my own breath made him flinch. I kept my voice low, slow, and even. Every time he looked up, I smiled not with teeth but with patience. Sometimes repetition is the gentlest sedative. By the third day, he managed half a bowl of food. I placed a mattress beside his crate and slept on the floor. Every time he stirred, I woke and touched his back softly. Gradually, Rex stopped crying at night. His little tail started to wag when I walked into the room, a small signal, but one that nearly brought me to tears. I began walking him around the yard. His first steps were shaky, the skin at his throat still dark with bruising, but his eyes had light again. Easy, Rex, that's it, I'd say, each time he made it a few steps farther. His recovery felt like the same kind of work I'd done my whole career, only this time my patient had 4 legs and floppy ears. I realized that saving a life isn't just about keeping it alive. It's about teaching them to trust the hands that reach for it. Rex learned to eat, to sleep, to play, and I learned to smile again, to plan for tomorrow. Little by little, we were healing each other. A week later, the bandage came off. The wound had closed, leaving only a thin scar. Rex darted around the house, tail swinging like a fan, and I couldn't stop smiling. That night, he climbed onto the sofa, curled up by my legs, and sighed himself to sleep. I stroked his back, feeling the steady pulse beneath my palm. The house wasn't a silent grave anymore, and I understood recovery doesn't always come from medicine or skill. Sometimes it's simply the act of staying patient, gentle, and unwilling to walk away. Rex had survived, and I had begun to live again. One evening in early June, rain began to fall. Soft, steady, the kind that hums against a tin roof and sounds almost like the heart monitors I used to listen to during long night shifts in the ER, counting every skipped beat with fear. Rex slept beneath the sofa, full and peaceful after dinner. The wound on his neck had healed, leaving only a faint brown thread of scar. I thought we were safe now. I was wrong. Wounds, whether in flesh or memory, have minds of their own. Close to midnight, a thunderclap split the sky. I startled, but what made me jump wasn't the sound. It was the ragged, strangled hiss from the floor. Rex sprang up, eyes wide, neck rigid. His breath came fast, shallow, panicked. He circled the room in frenzy, head low, rasping as if that invisible pipe were choking him all over again. I rushed forward, my pulse spiking the way it used to during a code. Rex, look at me. Breathe, it's okay. But he couldn't hear me. Rain hammered the porch. Lightning flashed through the windows, every sound and light only feeding his terror. I saw that same look again, the one he'd given me through the rim of plastic weeks ago, wild drowning and remembered fear. I didn't grab him. Touching him in that state would be wrong. So I crouched low on the floor, kept my voice steady and low. It's all right. I'm here. No one's tying you. No pipe. No rope. I kept talking short and rhythmic, the way I used to chant vitals in trauma rooms. After a while, Rex froze, ears trembling, eyes wide but locked on me. Slowly, I reached out and placed my hand on his chest, right where the heart beat. 1, 2, 3, I whispered. Breathe with me. In. Out. He trembled. Then he breathed, once, twice. The rasp softened, shifting to a coarse but steady rhythm. I stayed still, hand pressed over that heartbeat, holding on to the fragile life that had almost slipped away again. The rain kept striking the window, dripping in long streaks. In the dim yellow light, the scar at his neck looked darker than usual. And I understood for Rex the thunder tonight was an echo of that day, the storm. The choking, the helpless terror of being left to die. Memories like that don't disappear. They only sleep. And maybe so did mine. I stood and opened the porch door. The wind swept in cold and metallic, thick with the smell of wet earth. Come here, I called softly. Rex hesitated, then stepped forward, paws quivering. I tied the red bandana around his neck, the same one that had saved his life that first day. We're not afraid of the rain anymore, I told him. Because where fear began, that's where it ends. I led him onto the porch. Raindrops touched his nose. He flinched, then lifted his head. I stood beside him, letting the rain soak through my shoulders. Together, we watched the dark sky flicker with distant lightning. Rex took a deep breath, trembled once, then suddenly barked just one short sound, clear and alive. His first bark since the day I found him. I laughed, tears mixing with the rain. That was our ritual of healing, no ceremony, no miracle. Just a woman and a small creature brave enough to face their fear again. That night, Rex slept in my arms, breathing slow and steady, his scarred neck pressed against my chest. And I understood a scar doesn't need to vanish. It only needs to prove that we survived. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully, not from exhaustion, but from forgiveness. A year later, spring in Oregon felt gentler than I remembered. Gone was the dry, burning sun of the day I found him, only soft wind drifting through the young green birches. Rex had grown tall and strong, his black and tan coat gleaming in the light, his chest broad, his gait proud, yet still carrying that same warm gaze. Every time he sprinted across the yard, his red bandana fluttered behind him like a small flag of victory. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching him chase butterflies through the grass. The scar on his neck had faded to a faint line, curved like a pencil mark beneath the fur. I never wanted to erase it. I called it his lifeline, a reminder of that day I pulled a small soul back from the thin edge between indifference and compassion. Since the storm that night, Rex no longer feared thunder. Instead, when it rained, he'd lie by the window, ears perked, listening as if waiting for something. I like to think he'd learned that fear doesn't have to disappear only to be met with someone who stays. That spring, I received a letter from the hospital where I'd worked for decades, not an offer to return as a nurse, but as a volunteer to help train therapy dogs for recovery patients. The first day I brought Rex in, the hallways were blindingly white under the fluorescent lights. Familiar sounds echoed, the beeping of heart monitors, the squeak of gurneys, the hush of closing doors. Rex hesitated, and I placed a hand on his head. "It's okay, warrior," I whispered. He understood. He walked forward and gently laid his head on the hand of a young girl hooked to an IV. She giggled, and the whole room seemed to brighten. I realized then saving a creature isn't only about keeping it alive. It's about giving it the chance to help someone else live. Rex reminded me that there was still work to do, still hearts that needed steady hands to hold them through the fear. One afternoon, I drove Rex back to where it all began, the empty lot beside the old warehouse. The grass had grown tall, the iron fence rusted, and the pipe that nearly killed him lay in the back of my truck, cut clean, washed, and kept as a relic. I placed it on the ground where I had once knelt. Rex sat beside me in silence. I pressed a small wooden plaque into the soil, carved with the words, "For every soul left behind, keep breathing." The wind swept across the field, tugging at his red bandana. I bowed my head and whispered, "We did it, baby." As we walked away, Rex turned once and barked, short, clear, echoing across the open field. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a farewell. That night, I posted a photo of him online, a Doberman with a faint scar on his neck, sitting in the middle of a sunlit field under a pale blue sky. I wrote, "A year ago, he nearly died inside a discarded pipe. Today, he helps patients learn how to trust tomorrow." If you see an animal that needs help, please don't turn away. Sometimes, one small act can save 2 lives, theirs and your own. Hundreds of comments followed, stories of people rescuing cats, cradling lost dogs, stopping their cars just to move a bird off the road. I read every line, tears falling, but my heart was warm. There were still others, like us, people and animals, who believed that small kindnesses could shift the world. I closed the laptop and looked toward the sofa where Rex was lying. He lifted his head, those same brown eyes as clear as the first morning I saw him. I smiled and whispered, "Thank you, Rex. Because of you, I know I'm still breathing. thank you for staying with us until the end of Grace and Rex's story. If you cried or clenched your hands when he finally breathed again, then you already understand what matters most. Compassion still exists, and sometimes it's what saves the human in us. Rex was just a small Doberman, once left to die in a pile of trash, his neck caught in plastic. But from that darkest place, he still chose to trust to live and to love. And because of that, a woman named Grace found her reason to smile again. If this story touched your heart, please share this video so that anyone scrolling past another creature's pain will know that a small act of care can change 2 lives. Don't forget to subscribe and join us as we continue telling the stories of compassion, forgiveness, and the tiny souls who teach us how to love again. Join our Brave Paws family, because sometimes the ones we rescue are the ones who rescue us.